I'm the Smoking Cheddar, but you probably already knew that. Welcome to another unit build. Today we are looking at the Panzer. Now, I don't have a modern a modern Vanguard to show you, so you're just going to have to look at this this lovely little medium right here. And we have a scenario, and the scenario is we're looking for a semi-all-rounder tank, which is going to be able to defeat other tanks in one-on-one battle. And we're looking at something that is going to be good in terms of army group donation as well. So this isn't going to be the fastest, it's not going to be the strongest, it's going to be not quite the most well-rounded either. It's going to sit somewhere between being a very well-rounded tank and leaning towards being a very destructive tank in an army group. This is going to be something fun for you to drive around in the battlefield, and there's a high probability you have most of the skills already, if not some of the officers already unlocked. So this is something you can use pretty much from the get-go. If you are in silver or in gold and you have some of these officers already awakened, you haven't got to build towards it, it's going just to be a delightful unit for you to use. So without further ado, we will be looking at the technology in advanced, the technology in modern. We'll also be looking at the unit stats, parts and components. We'll also be looking at the officers themselves and the trained abilities. We'll also give a summary at the end as to how the unit is going to work. As always, I am the Smoking Cheddar. Please remember your drink of water and a snack. And if your missus is watching TV, whether that be Dallas, EastEnders, Coronation Street or Home and Away, make sure your headphones are in, turned on, you are comfy, because I have no idea how long this is going to be. Straight out the gate, we are going to be looking at the advanced tech before we move on to the modern tech. Now, with these unit builds, we are making a certain assumption, and that is that you have at least got to the end of the advanced tech tree, but not necessarily completed it. We'll look at some things that perhaps we can pick up to maximize along the way in order for us to help with our build. So, naturally, we're going to start off with the pictured techs. Special ops when light tanks, medium tanks and main battle tanks, which is what we're interested in, enter combat, their firepower is increased by 15% for 4 seconds. Any long-time viewer of the channel has seen this about 150 times. I don't apologise. It is what it is. We need to remember this 15% of firepower going forward, because this is where we're going to be likely stacking a lot of our stats. And of course, naturally, at the end of the tree, for advanced, we're looking at modern fire control systems. And if you are not aware, this increases your critical strike chance by 5%, while increasing your critical strike damage from 150 to 200%, increasing it by an overall of 50%. Well, that's pretty decent. We might be able to use this as well. So we'll see what we're doing. Naturally, we are going for a tank that's going to be getting into scraps. HP and firepower are high on that list for being completed. This is specifically being aimed at other tanks, so we're going to need this damage intensity bonus complete. We're also going to want to take the tank pen damage, because when we come up against things that do have an armor value and we are able to pen them, we're going to want to capitalize on that damage output. Automatic loader we are going to need. This is going to be a field fighting unit and we're going to need to pump out rounds as quickly as possible. An additional HP bonus that will come in very handy. And of course, damage intensity and damage resist, both of which need to be completed in order to reach the end of the tree. Let's go and have a look at the modern. So, much like the previous tech along this part of the tree, we are going to be looking for HP and firepower and anything that gives us a damage intensity or a damage resistance. So we'll skip all of that because there's quite a lot to do. And we'll move on to the picture tech. Now, with these builds, I only ever assume that you're going to make it to the first set of picture tech, not all the way to the end of the tree, because that is just an obscenely long length of time. And what we're looking at here is ETC guns. Whenever a light, medium or main battle tank troop attacks, it has a 40% chance to gain 5% firepower for 5 seconds, which can stack up to 3 times. So we're getting an additional 15% firepower yet again. And as I said before, we have lots of HP, firepower and damage intensity bonuses that we can leverage. We also have a natural critical strike rating that we can also leverage, which is going to increase our critical strike damage. So let's have a look at the parts, components and things we can put on the tank. Here we are in the Vanguard section, and you'll notice that all of these are firepower and load time and firing accuracy based barrels. So obviously we're going to be stacking that firepower. Load time is very nice as well. And then with the engines, as you can see, they are all HP and troop speed related. So the troop speed is nice, but it's not something that we can use with the Vanguard tank particularly well. This is more suited towards a Liberty style setup, but you know, it's nice. It gives us a little bit of an option if we decide to go and train an additional skill in troop speed. Now we have options for the armor. We can go for blast mitigation, or we can go for HP. Now we're not going to go for blast mit, we don't need it. We're going to be mainly focusing against other tanks, so we're going to want the HP. And in the auxiliary slot, maintenance and supply slot, slot number 4, we're going pure firepower for both of these slots. We just need to double stack the firepower and get that as high as we can. Because as we start throwing wrenches into this tank, we want it to deal as much damage as humanly possible. So let's have a look at the stats for this unit. So as always, I like to do this at silver 1 cap, 8.1. Obviously I don't have it unlocked. We can see here we have a 243 penetration depth and a sloped armor of 272. So let's have a look at the other tanks within its class and see how that compares.
Nice to meet you.
So we've got a 243 and a 249. 249 for the sloped armor versus the 243. We're just under that penetration rating for the enemy tank. However, that tank cannot pen us. Well, it can, but not as regularly as we would like.
I should be a scientist in a laboratory.
And in terms of the Martyr main battle tank, again, we're just under the sloped armor rating, and penetration is going to be difficult versus us as well. So we could do one thing. This is a additional option that we can kind of use, but it's not really good for this build. So you'll notice earlier I was going through all of the gold plus parts, and they didn't appear to change. That's not true for all factions. And some of them have an increased pen depth. I think if we compare the Vanguard Division 1, we have firing accuracy, pen pen depth. So we have two options from the martyr list where we can take this penetration depth and then we can score penetration hits on the enemy tank. This comes at the cost of the fact you won't get a 30% bonus from the barrel. In order to damage the to increase your damage output, you will be relying solely on the penetration output of the unit. So is it worth it? Not really. Not for this build. This build we're worried about other things. We're not really worried about the penetration, but I just wanted to throw that in there in case you have this part. Don't think that you need the Vanguard specific part, because this build will work if you do have the pen depth increased martyr barrel that you can stick on the Vanguard tank. I digress. We shall return to the officers now.
We will come. We will see.
So
We will conquer.
we can we're going to have a look at this officer. Gets overlooked a little bit for field fighting. Is that fair? So the idea of this build is we have 1 shield, 1 damage. Now we know we get a shield coefficient of 1500. We know the tank is going to deploy a shield as it enters combat, and we get a firepower buff with this shield, which makes it very good in field fighting. We also get a nice little bonus as it transfers the HP of the unit to the base in a defensive situation, although it's not really needed all that much, if I'm honest. But we have damage intensity as a skill here. So if you cast your mind back to when we were looking at the tree, we were looking at a lot of damage intensity. We were looking at damage resistance as well. Yes, we do have critical strike as an option, but we're not going to leverage that for this. We're going to leverage something else. Foreshadowing. We have a officer skill resilience buff. So we're going to take less skill damage as a result of having this officer in the captain slot. Now we want the shield to go off first, so we have the best possible outcome for this. And the skill resilience means that if they're going to hit you with a skill damage and you're going to hit them with a skill damage, at least you're going to be taking less damage, which is the goal. The goal here is to destroy the enemy tank faster than they can destroy you. And this also increases the officer's unit HP by up to 40%. Who are we going with for a second officer?
So where to and
Madame Havoc. And the reason being is that we're going to get a very nice damage coefficient output for the unit, and we've stacked firepower and we've stacked damage intensity, and this officer is very good with both of those. We get an additional 25% on her skill damage on top of her already high 1800 sitting right there. So we're looking at 450 on top of that 1800. That's a pretty hefty sum. We're looking at 22 plus. Again, we've got a very nice firepower buff of 40%. We've got a damage resistance whenever we enter combat for the first time. This will stack alongside the shield that gets deployed in the MBT, so it's going to increase the resistance to that tank. So if they manage to knock that shield out, we've still got this resistance sitting behind it, which is going to be very, very nice. We have a damage intensity buff of up to 20%, but most importantly, we have a good awakened skill here. Whenever this officer's tank or helicopter troop attacks an enemy, it gains a stackable effect for 8 seconds, up to 10 stacks. Casting this officer's tactical skill consumes all existing stacks, increasing the skill damage coefficient by 90 for each stack. So obviously it goes up to 10. We get a 900 skill damage on top of the skill damage we're already doing. So she basically doubles up as 2 officers with skill damage, which is why she's absolutely brilliant to pair with any officer that has a shield. That's why you see her and Uncle quite a lot. and I know we could go with Uncle for this build, but I would like to explore other options. And
We will
as I said, with her we get additional firepower from her tactical skill. It is only 8%, but we can stack it. Now, what are we going to train? I hear you say. Cheddar, there's plenty of things that we could train. Yes, there is. The first skill we are going to be hunting down, ladies and gentlemen. Load time reduction. We're going to increase our rate of fire by a significant amount, and we're going to try and use that stackable effect and the damage intensity to overcome our opponent. So, with that in mind, what offensive skill are we going to pick? Madame Havoc, the aid, what trained skills are we looking for? Hopefully you have this skill. Explosive Expression increases the damage intensity of the officer's troop by 10% and the damage resistance of the troop by an additional 10%. You can get that one from Maestro. And for the last skill we have damage intensity. This is a fairly common skill that can be picked up from a number of officers, so don't worry about which officer you pick it up from. If you do happen to have Bomb Princess down here, it actually gives you a little bonus when the target HP drops below 25%, increases the damage HP by an additional 5%, so it gives you a nice little kill shot ability where you're able to deal slightly more damage as a result of them having slightly less HP. But you'll be very lucky if you have that officer, as it was a limited officer that was only available during a small window of opportunity. So, what does that mean for this unit? How does this unit work? How does this Panzer absolutely ruin? It's a pop out and snipe. You can leave your base, fire a single shot and not have to worry about the skill damages or the tactical skill for the shield popping off. We're not really concerned about any of that. This is all about rate of fire and damage intensity, overcoming that damage resistance and being able to pour on a couple of shots on passing units. Now, how does this work out for an AG? AGs are very chaotic. There's a lot going on. Quite often units, when they're at the front line, won't survive long enough for them to produce a skill effect. The second rank units do that. This kind of solves that problem. If it is on a second rank, it's going to be able to produce a skill shot that's going to be quite deadly. If it is on the front rank, at least its main gun is going to hurt the enemy somewhat, helping the AG overcome its its defensives. So we're going to be looking at this unit rolling up, having a higher than average armor for a tank, having a higher than average firepower for a tank, and we're looking at the damage intensity being high enough and the reload time being low enough for that single main shot that's going to be going off every 2 to 3 seconds to actually matter. Now, if it does obviously get to the skill damage stage, we have a good shield that's going to pop off first, and that's going to increase the firepower, which is then in turn going to make that skill shot when it goes incredibly deadly. It's not going to wipe out another tank immediately, but it is certainly going to cripple it. Now, a lot of people do run the 1 shield 1 damage combo. That's fine. Just so you're aware, this is not going to be 100% optimal. It fills a very, very niche set of requirements that you want a tank that can drive around, rat out enemy targets, and it's going to just be a nuisance to the enemy. This is going to be no good at defending your base. It's going to be okay in an AG if you decide to donate, and if you don't decide to donate, it's not going to move fast enough for it to be a problem for the enemy on the battlefield in terms of ratting. But it is going to have a gun that when it fires, it is going to be able to cut off supplied infantry or supplied artillery or supplied tanks that are being filtered into the front line, if you can sneak it in there. I mean, typically that's normally done with helicopters or light tanks, as they're fast movers and they hit really quickly and fairly hard. But if you do manage to get a battle tank in there, we do know that these things are even more effective once the main guns go off, and that's what we're looking for here. The main gun dealing most of the damage, doing the backbone, doing the majority of the work and helping with the backbone of your army going forwards. This tank will give you that capability. If you decide to pop out of your base and shoot at an enemy artillery piece that is about to surround your base, it's going to have a lower load time reduction. It's going to be able to pop off a shot, and it's going to be able to deal some significant amount of damage, as that is going to have a high amount of damage intensity and firepower stacked against the enemy damage resistances, and typically artillery have a lower damage resistance and a lower HP, so you're going to be able to deal quite a bit of damage there. If this thing comes up against something like an anti-tank gun, if that anti-tank gun gets the first hit off, it's probably not going to survive that long, as we're not looking towards the HP for this unit. So don't be surprised if this thing gets absolutely ruined by the Martyr helicopter as well. But in a toe-to-toe fight against another main battle tank, this will hold its own. It will be able to go up against most other main battle tank builds, and it will most certainly be a contender. Now, obviously, we could have used Uncle, we could have had a slightly better shield, we could have had slightly better other bits and pieces, but what we really wanted was that tiny little boost with firepower that comes with the shield being deployed, rather than the damage resistance that you get through Uncle. And most people generally have some of the older officers awakened, and those of you who play tanks will obviously have been or will already be in the process of awakening Havoc, because she is such a good officer. So this is a fairly easy build to complete, to be perfectly honest. And as always with MBT builds, you don't necessarily need to stick to the same faction that I'm producing or that I'm showing you here, because they're fairly flexible units. It's the same with the infantry, and it's to a degree the same with the artillery. However, with these builds, we are trying to explore very specifically the min-max. So while you don't have to follow this, it is a guideline, and if you do decide to follow it, it is going to maximize from that guide, from that guideline. So anyway, I've been the Smoking Cheddar. You've been very patient, and I now have to go and edit a ton of videos. As always, a link will be in the description box down below for my Discord. Please be an adult about it. We do say a lot of random and horrible stuff to each other, so if you are in any way soft, it's probably not for you. Feel free to come in and bully me, because I'm probably going to do it back, mate, if I'm fair. And also bully Benny. He disappears for weeks at a time, and then he reappears, and then he groups my server into like a whole bunch of other servers he doesn't visit. So bully him, and you'll get to know him soon enough if you start chatting into the general chat. Anyway, I've been the Smoking Cheddar again. You've been very patient, and that's the Panzer unit build. It's not the best, it's definitely not the worst, but it's going to be pretty easy for you to complete.